I'll be on. Wow. Hey, everybody. How you doing today? My name is Sharon Combs with UCDI Leadership, a subsidiary of Do Something Daily, LLC. And this evening, this fine Friday evening, we're just going to have a conversation with a few friends, and we're going to talk about Juneteenth. We're going to talk about history. You guys, if you've been on here, you know I'm a big fan of origins, patterns, and identifiers. If you can point out the problem, it's easy to point out the problem, but navigating solutions is not as easy. And so today we're just going to have heartfelt nuts and bolts conversation. I also want to mention, last Friday was the anniversary of the Loving, where it was legal. It was made legal so that individuals can actually marry someone who is not their race. And so we're going to just ask some questions. That's it. We do want to say this is in celebration of Juneteenth. This is a special episode. We're not going to do a bunch of things like dancing and things like that, but we just want to see where we were, where we are now, and hopefully where we can go. I have Zelma Lewis with us. She's retired. She says she want to put that RAT on there, but she's a registered nurse. Oh my gosh, she got all of those initials in there. She's been in the medical field for years. She's been an advocate for many things for years. And so I'm really excited about hearing her viewpoint. We have Stephen and Sherry with us. They're up there in Washington State. I've known Sherry for some years. We were able to work with children, educating children together. Really got an opportunity to see how system worked in that way as well. And so I'm glad that her and Stephen will be with us today. And then my name, I'm Sharon. Just say hey. So if you have any questions, please ask your questions. If you have any comments, please share your comments. I hope that you are enjoying this Juneteenth Friday, though. So first things first, this week, this whole month, we've been talking about isms, guys. My guests, we've been talking about isms within systems. I want to start with you, Z.
So, I have to talk to you a little later, baby.
Okay, Z's on the phone. All right. Then I'll start with Stephen and Sherry.
I'm good.
Are you good?
I'm good.
All right, let's do it. So, Z, you've been in the medical field for quite a while.
Yes, many years.
Can you share with me maybe some areas where you see within that system as far as the isms, whether it's sexism, racism, or any ism, where you see we have made progress? Can you point to some of the, based on where you started and where we are now?
Well, it's interesting that you asked this because I started my nursing career in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the focal point of this week's presidential rally. And even in Oklahoma, in the nursing school, Hillcrest, I was one of two African-American students. And I also grew up and was raised in Tulsa. So, I've seen growth in the sense of one being able, like I was able to get my RN. I was able to work at Hillcrest. I was able to be in charge on the floor. Now there were instances, when I was called, and I don't use the N word, I use nigger. And I just had to educate people. I did a lot of educating in Tulsa when actually, no, I didn't. I take that back because at that time I was still very self-conscious myself about being an African American. So I didn't really use my voice. And it wasn't until I came to California in 1973 and I was surrounded by more African Americans in California. And I saw that we were more vocal, more active. And so I began using my voice in California. Um, I also went to a primarily all white junior high and high school. And here again, because it was mostly all white, I didn't have a voice except to sing. And so it has taken a long time. Um, as far as the progress, I believe a lot of progress, especially, has been made in healthcare. But I only saw that here in California because I've been here for the last, I don't know, over 50 years. And also I've stayed here in California because of the activism, because I feel like there's more opportunities for African Americans, people of color. I live in Oakland, California, but I also noticed that in California, the racism is more subtle, um, more, it happens more with people not getting promotions or ideas being stolen, that kind of thing. I didn't experience that myself, but because in all of the, my son, Darren,
Hey.
in all of the jobs I've had in the hospitals, they've been unionized. Um, but for whatever reason, I've been given a gift to be able to work amongst people of all races. I mean, as a nurse, I had to, and moving to California, I've worked with many people of different races, and so I have wonderful people skills that have stood me in good stead. And so I'd like to stop right now and let Sharon and Sherry and Stephen talk. But I
Okay.
have more. I have more. I'm not complete.
Okay. Okay. She is not complete.
Oh,
All right. So Stephen and Sherry, Stephen, where can you tell me a little about where you're from? Like maybe, and then Sherry, if you don't mind telling me some of the same things, because my follow-up question will be, I want to ask, there had to been some, well, I don't know. I'm assuming. I don't want to assume. It's
So,
possible that there were some conversations or some worldviews that collided, because based on where you're from, that's what kind of shapes your worldview until you have experiences to challenge those.
so I grew up in a little town called Port Orchard, Washington. It's by Bremerton, Washington, because my dad worked in the shipyard, and it's about an hour from Seattle by ferry. So, um, it was a quiet little town, but it was pretty sheltered. Like there weren't a lot of people of diversity in that area. I mean, there were pockets, but not nothing like Seattle per se. Um, so I guess I was, I thought things were just kind of like normal, like growing up as a kid, but obviously that's not the case. So, um, and then now I live on the eastern side of the state, and so that has its own other challenges too. So,
And I grew up on the East Coast, Trenton, New Jersey. I did spend some time as a child in Long Beach. That's where my parents, drove cross country to be with my dad's family. And then we flew back. And when I was 8 years old, my dad, my mom, my sister, and I, we went back to the East Coast and, was raised in Trenton, New Jersey up until I went away to college to go to Oklahoma. And so having those experiences, going to private school, predominantly white private school, then going to ORU, and then seeing a lot. I wanted to go to North Carolina A&T. That was my first choice, but I was not accepted. So my little heart was broken, and I'm like, okay, God, you must have a plan. But going to ORU and meeting so many different people, which I was cool with because being at the private school that I went to, even though the African American numbers were small, there was still there was a lot of diversity. So East Indian, Jewish, Italian, there were just so many. And so I was for myself, and then just, commuting back and forth from the inner city, being bused into, the suburb, if you will, for that better education, in quotes. It was definitely an experience in of itself. So.
Right, so here's a hard question. So take a moment, take a breather, and then let's answer it. Were there things that when we were coming up, all of us, wherever we were, when you were coming up, were there things that you thought Black people could not do? Like just like whether it's a job or whether did you think everything was possible? And if that changed, at what age?
Since I'm the eldest on this group,
Okay.
I definitely chose to be a nurse because nursing, teaching, or secretary. And I'm not sure why nursing, except I think later on my mother told me that I had always been very caring, and like if older people came to the house, I was very accommodating. I don't recall any of that. I just remember in high school when we had to look up, occupations that we thought we might be interested in. I never gave any other careers any thought. And even to this day, sometimes it hits me that there were um, no nursing role models in my family. Why didn't I choose to become an LVN, which is a very admirable job in itself too. But I chose to become an RN, um, and a teacher. That was a little too much. One of the things, my mother worked as a domestic worker, and I would go to work with her sometime, sort of like in the movie The Help. But fortunately, she had two or three people who really loved her that she worked with and were pretty much kind of family. Um, but I knew in going to work with her that that's not what I wanted to do. But this was 1964, 62. I graduated from high school in 1963. So that was about the time that, things were kind of changing, turning around. Maybe for some people, for some African Americans, it might have been for the worse. For me, it tended to be for the better.
Excellent.
So that's sort of how I chose what I chose to be my nursing career.
Thank you for that, because that's not a narrative that we often hear, especially on TV. TV sometimes shows the more sensational parts of what's sensationalism. So it, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Stephen and Sherry, when you guys did you have a preconceived? I know I did, but that's me. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, west side of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so I definitely had preconceived. Do you all have not in a bad way, but just preconceived notions? No, I'm not, and I'm not assigning any meaning to it. Children are pretty innocent. You're kind of the canvas that you're painted. So.
Well, for me, I can honestly go back and look in my early childhood, and some of the things is for me is like, I'm kind of going to split this question a little bit. When they say racism is taught a little bit, I can remember people telling me stuff when I was a little kid, and unfortunately, you don't know any better when you're a little kid. People had their whatever wrongs, that they would tell you. And, as a kid, you're like little, you didn't think anything of it. Now, as I got older, the advantage of getting older was my parents would have exchange students come from different countries.
Mm.
And so that really opened my eyes to, we had them from Japan, Germany, Cyprus, Greece, different people, Sri Lanka. We had a guy come over one time, had dinner with him, different people. And you got to sit there and talk to them and get like a take on their culture, their life. And so that really was kind of the opening of my eyes to, hey, it's not just all white people. You know, there's other races in the world and stuff. And the other thing too, and I'll finish with this, was in my first marriage, I spent 13 years in the Pacific Islander community of the Samoan, which 3 of my children, I have a boy and an older son and 2 older daughters, along with the son we have with me and Sherry, that are, you know, a mixed race Samoan. And so I can not only see the struggle that the Islanders had to, like, with race from people, but also that the opposite of that, you know, there's the reverse racism too, where there are some people that just don't like you because you're white. It happens to, you know, anybody. So that really, like, opened my eyes. But I will always never forget what I learned in that 13 years being in that environment, because it really was a great, I mean, I learned a lot about family and culture, and it was really a wonderful thing.
Excellent.
For me, I can definitely say that my family, my mom's side of the family, I was just born into a family of educators. So they always made sure that we were exposed to as many people, professions as possible. We would meet lawyers, you know, we would meet, you know, doctors. There was always access. So I know for me personally, I can't say that there was a time when I thought that as Black people, we couldn't do anything. I think it was just more so, Sherry, what can you do? It's like,
Excellent.
math is not my forte. Okay, I won't be doing this, or I won't be doing that. So it's more personal, like, you know, what I could or could not do, not necessarily what others couldn't do, because I lived in a community that was, I mean, we had, growing up, there was police presence a lot. And in that, I would always think, well, why don't they just make the better choice? Like, I don't get it. Like, you don't have to sell drugs. Like, why are you doing that? You know, like, that was my thinking. So, because I'm like, I was always looking at every individual, like, we can do better. Like, why not? You know, and I just didn't get it.
Okay, I just want to share, like, for me, I didn't have those 2 narratives. I was raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think, you know, what actually goes into you is it has such a strong impact on how you view different things. And my mom had a very strong work ethic. You know, I don't remember my mom not working ever. You know, I think from the day I came out the womb, she was still working. Like, let's do it. And so that work ethic has been passed to me. But I do remember growing up, and I would have teachers, and, you know, and I really believe their intentions, even now, that their intentions were sincere. I believe there were a few that weren't. And they would be like, oh, you're so smart. And then they would add onto the end, you know, you're not like the others. And I remember, I'm getting a little emotional. I remember just always thinking, like, well, the others, that's my mom. Like, that's my mother, my brother, and my sisters. So if I'm not like them, then who am I like? And I would literally have a rejection complex, like, from both sides. And so when I would be around people who were my shade, you know, because I was a nerd. I read dictionaries at a young age, but I didn't want anybody to know that. Now I don't care. I'm like, yes, I did read that dictionary. But as a child, you don't know that. So I would try to keep that under wraps, that I was doing that, because it wasn't cool. And I believe the lie that Black people didn't do that, you know? And so I do remember teachers saying different things to me, your people, you people, things like that. But I also remember teachers who didn't. I remember teachers really pulling me to the side and like, hey, listen, you have a gift, you know, and do this and do that. And so, but when I came out, I literally believed that I would either be in jail or dead by the time I was 30. I remember when I turned 30, I was like, man, I'm still here and I don't have a plan. You know, like, hold on, I'm here. I didn't really plan past this part. And so, and I think that too is probably a large portion of the reason I try to use my platform and my voice to educate so many people. Anyway, I'm just saying, so I did have an idea of what Black people could and couldn't do. The idea of a Black president or owning a company. Go ahead, Zay, you can jump right in. It's
okay. I
Yeah.
was just going to say, I talked about, when I went to nursing school, I was what, 18. But prior to that, as I mentioned before, I had gone to an all-white high school, and I didn't have a voice. And it wasn't, and I've always made wonderful grades, like, you know, but the thing is, when I was in junior high, and there was a teacher named Miss Crow who wore red, white, and blue every day in some form or fashion. And Miss Crow told us that a quarter, 25% of our grade would be verbal. I would have to participate verbally. I was so embarrassed. I was so upset. I was just, but she meant it. And so that is one way I started speaking up. Also in high school, I had other, like you, another teacher. I can't even think of what her name was. Um, I've always been good with writing papers and that kind of thing, and so she encouraged me to be on the journalistic team. I also belonged to the nurse club or whatever it was called at that time. So I feel like I've had some really good opportunities, but I think on the one hand, it could be you're the exception. I was the exception. You know what I'm saying, and not the rule. Um,
Yeah, and I
so
definitely know because
it's a learning experience. It's been something. It's been I cannot tell you all how grateful, how truly grateful I am to be alive. I'm 75 years old, to be alive and well in this environment now that is so rich with growth, with racism, with learning, with teaching, with my God. My son, who just he's 41, and he was not raised in Tulsa, so he was raised strictly here in Oakland. And I've not really actually talked to him a lot about what I experienced in Tulsa. Uh, and he's had his. I don't know if I'm segueing. You look like you want us to say something. You go ahead,
I
Shannon.
do. I have what I want to say. I want to ask this question though, along those lines.
Okay,
So you have that, and Sarah and Stephen, you have that. So today's Juneteenth, right?
right.
And okay, so some elephants in the room. So we can include them. We can factor them in, but we don't have to stay on them. Elephants in the room. President Trump will be going to have like a rally, a meeting, starting his campaigning in Tulsa on the Juneteenth weekend, which the African American community does celebrate. Even though a lot of people commercially, it's not like Kwanzaa, but it's been celebrated for over 150 years. It is not a secret. And so somebody said, you don't look a day over 45. You've been kissed by the sun. It's one of the comments. So we have that. We have like the Black Lives Matter movement, which a lot of people are like, hey, they're getting behind supporting. Then you just also have like the Black Coalition movement, which is about financial things. And so we have all of these melting pots, as Luane from CS Assistance said before, like all of these mini fractures that we've had over the course of history. All of a sudden now it's like things are breaking down, but that's okay because maybe now you reset it for real instead of band-aiding things. And in that,
Mhm.
we have an awesome time for real conversations, not conversations that put things on the back burner, but conversations that move things forward. And so I want to ask, I'm gonna start with Stephen and Sherry. Yay, I love the fact that y'all, you guys are together. That's what's up. I also know that there had to been times when y'all had to have conversations that didn't have to do with bills, that had to do with preconceived notions, or like, hey, that's not funny to me, or is that? So I wanted to say, like, because we all need to be able to have these conversations.
Right.
Like our emotions are going to be in it, but we need to be able to have the conversation sometimes even apart from our emotions. Emotions may push the conversation to having to be had, but it doesn't mean that it drives the entire conversation. So how do you guys handle those differences when it comes down to straight up race? It's race. It ain't funny, like something that maybe you let go when you're around your culture. But
Mhm.
then when somebody else is coming and sitting in there, hey, that's not funny as much. And
Mhm.
they're uncomfortable, or you're uncomfortable, whether you're at the cookout or whether you're at, whatever, or at the other cookout, whatever family's going to cook.
Television.
Yes. Television, yeah. Things that are said. How do you guys have those hard conversations?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that, and this might be kind of a sidebar, but one of the things that I didn't understand until Sherry brought up a couple of these documentaries on the history of racism and how systemic it was. I had no idea it was that bad, like that it was actually written into the Constitution and things like that. So I probably had preconceived notions that.
Wait. Message. I want y'all to hear. It was written into the Constitution. I am a Christian. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have many friends who don't have my melanin. And sometimes you'll be so quick to be like, we're founded on these principles. I get that, but there are other things that were written in as well. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. No, that's fine. I was just going to say that I just really from the beginning of this nation, you know, it was. I don't like to use the word rigged, but kind of it was rigged. I mean, to be honest with you, if you look at it, like,
I thank you for saying that. You know,
I mean, and it took me a lot. Like, I had to like watch some stuff and just kind of. I do process. I'll watch it and then like I can watch like one movie at a time, and I'll have to go process for a while. And once I do that, then I can then I'll ask Sherry questions like, and she'll be like, right, you know, and like she's known it all this time, and I'm like. Well, I'm a newbie. Sorry, I'm just, you know, you're just gonna have to walk me through this because I really, you know, to me it just goes over my head sometimes. Now we have experienced, you know, the microaggressions, you know, the subtle things, you know, even if we're together, you know, the people, the looks from the over the counter that you're like, oh, okay, you know, I mean, you know, we see that, you know. And we're just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just keep praying for that person, you know.
Exactly.
And move on, you know.
I think the biggest thing for me, because feeling like I've been all over the country, and then for me to, you know, like, you know, laying down my roots up here, I really thought I was going to be in Oklahoma. I really, really did. So when God had this little spin to it, I'm like, okay, God, I know that your way is going to be amazing. So for me to be so far from family, and to be just with my family with Stephen, you know, it's like having to, for me, in order to process, in order to continue to go through life, really having to deepen my roots in God all the more, because when you have I'll just, you know, just say, for instance, the places that have been my sanctuary have always been church. So when you have church members who cannot relate at all, so it's like, what can you share with them? You really can't until God really opens up those doors so that you can have those heart-to-heart conversations. So my first couple of years up here, it was a lot of phone calls, you know, to my family and friends in Tulsa and back, you know, in New Jersey. A lot of, you know, just like, oh, Lord, please, you know, open up people's hearts, open up their eyes so that they can see. Now with everything just on blast, I'm like, yes. Woo-hoo! And the reason why I say that is because being a woman of faith in Christ, I really know that God is serious about his church getting cleaned up. And sometimes things have to get ugly before they can become beautiful. Right. And so it's been so long that things have been brushed under the rug and haven't been addressed. And now it's here. And, you know, again, elephant in the room, you know, President Trump is going to have his rally tomorrow. You know, when I first heard that he was planning on Juneteenth, I was like, Lord, and I as soon as I heard it, all I could do is just say just like a whisper of a prayer. Mm-hmm. I said, Lord, please have him move it to Saturday, because not everybody is there yet. And then like before the week was out, you know, they're like, oh, he's changing it to the 20th instead of the 19th. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Just because there's still healing that is required. And there is still things that have to be addressed. And again, my focus on racial reconciliation is in the church, just because the church has been what, like now many people, unbeknownst to them, but the church has been complicit in this system, and has benefited from this system. And so, for there to be some healing, because God's not pleased. And so we have an opportunity, or this will happen again. And so I'm excited. If anything, the conversations are hard. Yes. There's a lot of praying and grace for each other, because Stephen has, some history, with law enforcement. So there's some things that he's able to explain to me that I just didn't think about, or I just didn't know, certain training things. And then, again, we're able to, converse together, and just even in our own homes, like, okay, well, how could we make this better? Like, what would we need to do? Or, things like that. So there's always conversation. I'm always open. My biggest challenge today is to make sure that I keep I call them the insects out of the garden of my heart, because I know that there's so many little seeds of divisiveness that I can choose to pick up if I wanted to, but I choose not to, because I want the love of God to flow through me, through my family. I want there to be such reconciliation that the world will then, be able to receive the love and life that God had intended from the very beginning. So,
Okay. Z, do you have any way in there, or I go?
I was thinking more in terms of gentrification.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah,
Talk
because
about it.
because being in Oakland when I first came here in 1973, I think the percentage of African Americans was more like, 30s, but now it's like down to 11%, 7%. I'm not sure.
In Oakland?
In my own, yes.
Wow.
Because it is so expensive to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, especially one of our former governors started really gentrifying the different areas of Oakland, which, I'm kind of torn, because in one way, yes, you want your neighborhood to look nice and to, but more than that, I want people to be able to afford to live where they want to live. And so I have wonderful neighbors. When I first moved, I had neighbors who were people of color, a few African Americans. Now it is predominantly young white professionals, several of them who have children, which is good. I was very torn, very upset. However, I too am, I belong to the Church of Religious Science, and I am a peacemaker. And so ultimately, I've gotten to know my neighbors. We were hugging, but now because of COVID-19, and I babysat for their children, and so it's all to me about connections, about getting to know each other one-on-one. It's like what people were saying about. I know one of my choir members who's African American was saying that just because a person has a child of color, a spouse of color, working in a job with, or living in a neighborhood that's mixed, all this doesn't mean that we're not racist or we're not biased or we're not any of that. It means getting in and doing the inner work, getting to know each other, listening to each other. If that means that you have arguments, you have this or whatever it takes, and then ultimately to surrender and allow and see that person as a human being. I love differences. I see color. I love variety. So gentrification is a huge one for me, especially in this Bay Area, where so many people have had to leave and go back to the South, or move somewhere else.
Now, we're not going to go too deep into this today, but that too is an ism, just for those of you who don't know. Like, that's an ism. There are things that are called redlining, that were banks where if you lived within a certain, like, they would draw a red line on the map. And if you were trying to get a house within that area, that red line area, you're not going to get a loan. And so there are practices, and that's even with Juneteenth. Like Juneteenth is because there was a proclamation made by the then president, Abraham Lincoln. And then, you know, but it didn't go out to, we didn't have Facebook then. We didn't have Facebook and TV like we have now. So information wasn't as readily available. There wasn't a YouTube or a Snapchat or Kik or anything like that. So there were some people who didn't get that information until later, and Texas was the last state to do it. And part of the reason was because they wanted to allow the plantation owners to get their final crop in, you know. And there were other people who did try to get their information to the then slaves, but you know, they would come up missing, dead, just different things would come up. That information wasn't able to get there. Wow. Kind of like back in the day when they had the Pony Express, you didn't get all your mail with the Pony Express. It was a, you know, they needed hazard pay too. And so these messengers probably needed some hazard pay. But anyway, to make the long story short, even after Juneteenth, and we celebrate Juneteenth because it is a victory, but even after that, there were other laws that were passed that immediately would almost make you a slave again. Yeah. Like vagrancy. If you didn't have a job, then the vagrancy law. Well, you're not gonna have a job. You just finished being a slave. And if the what was, so you know, but I'm saying, like, systematically, there are isms within systems, and sometimes those things sit on the books for years. Like, I'm sure somewhere in America, it's still illegal for people who are not the same race, probably to, you know, to be married. But there is a higher precedent that overrides that. Right. But there are things that the origin of it establishes a pattern, and it just sits on the books for years and years, until someone clashes with it and is like, who thought that was a good idea? And then you're able to unwrap that thing. And so I don't even know why I was sharing that. Oh, I wanted to share that, and I wanted to share the thing about the church because I too, you know, I subscribe to biblical principles. And a few years back, I shared some information with someone that I believe. I was like, no, we're family. You know, we're all one in Christ. There's no Jew or, you know, I believe that. And I still believe that as far as the bride of Christ. However, we are people, and people have their own flaws. We all have our own flaws, yes, and our things that we have to be willing to look at. And sometimes you got to get past the defensive moment and still open up. But yes, I overstepped with a relationship that I thought was one way, and I'm telling you, it kicked back within the church because there are some preconceived notions, and there are some, you know, some bias within how people see individuals. And I just remember that when during that time, and I remember I was like, ooh, oh my gosh. I poked the bear, I poked the hornets. And it wasn't even like, I didn't think it was a big deal. I'm just like, hey, that hurts people. And when you say that, this is how people of color feel. And I mean, it came like, how dare you? How dare you? So, you know, and hopefully now, though, like I said, now many people are looking at those things. So I probably was just a few years too early in trying to force a conversation or have a conversation that I thought could be had. And so that probably was, not probably, I'm sure it was some type of immaturity on my part to not see the flags. But I'm glad that those conversations are being had now. Okay, so I want to read this. Donnie says, ignoring or pretending not to hear derogatory or insensitive remarks was more laborious than dealing with the conversations currently being prompted. Well, that's true. What I believe she's saying there is ignoring or acting like you don't hear the stuff is more laborious. Like, I would be exhausted. There would be times I would be exhausted when I would come home, just because the way I was raised is don't say nothing, go out of your way. This is just for me. Go out of your way, you know, don't make white people uncomfortable. You know, don't you be that angry black woman. Why you asking all those questions? Just be happy with what they give you, you know. Listen, don't be mad if you always got to ride in the back of the truck. You getting a ride, you know, like, so I was raised like that, you know, I really was. That was the culture. And nobody really had to tell you that. You just see it and you learn it. I remember a teacher taking the tuna salad sandwich for me, and I wanted it. I'd been in that line for a long time. I was about in the 3rd grade, and I was like, yes, it was one left, and I was like, yes, tuna salad. And I was so happy, and the person behind me wanted tuna salad, who happened to be white. And they were like, I want the tuna salad, and the teacher took it from me and gave me a chicken salad sandwich. He was like, y'all like chicken. And I remember for like 20 something years, I didn't eat chicken. I was like, I'm not
Oh,
eating
wow.
watermelon, you know, just it
Really?
created. And so, yeah, so those experiences taught, like, don't make difference, don't do this. And a lot of times when you talk about this, like sometimes white people or other cultures that get uncomfortable because they're like, well, where is she going with it? That's as far as I'm going. That's as far as I'm going with it. Like, I'm not mad at anybody in the room with me right now. You didn't take my sandwich. And that teacher probably didn't even think she was doing nothing wrong. She was like, y'all like chicken. It'll be okay, you know? But I was like, no, I want, yes, just because I like chicken don't mean I like it more than tuna. I want this sandwich. I waited for this sandwich. And so, yeah, it was crazy. So I understand what Donnie is saying. That's exhausting. That's emotionally exhausting and crippling.
But Sharon, I think too, what you just said about us not using our voice, a lot of that has to do with being female and how
Yeah.
we're taught to be quiet and,
Children seen, not
so
heard.
these isms are kind of overlapping. And
Yes.
I mean, we really could be a messed up nation, but for the grace of God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Grace of
Exactly.
God. My
I know for
God.
myself, I was just telling actually a friend, I said, in my head, I have had the edit button on for so long because I didn't want to come across as the angry Black woman. I didn't want to come across as the complaining one or whatever. And I'm just like, Lord Jesus, this has to stop this year. But for me to be able to at least acknowledge it first and then now verbalize it, it's like, wow, okay, God's doing some more healing in me too.
Yeah. And it doesn't give us a license to over respond.
No.
It doesn't give me license to call people out of their name. It doesn't give, oh, let me say this to the audience. It doesn't give me license to be racist.
Correct.
Just because I am a minority, listen, you can be racist you can be racist against other races. You can even be racist against your own race if you've been taught these principles and you believe it. If you believe all anything is always this, then maybe you need to look at that because you haven't met all and always isn't finished yet. So, that's something that we want to look at. Donnie put something on here. Slavery was not abolished until 1994. That's what I'm saying. Like, these patterns get on the books. Mm-hmm. And probably the only reason it was abolished in 1994 is because somebody bumped up against it. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that are just sitting there. They're just sitting there. And so, yeah, so those were a couple of funny stories or whatever that helped shape. But I am glad, I am really glad, and I am celebrating Juneteenth. Mm-hmm. I looked at a commercial in 2019. It was a Pennzoil commercial, and it had a black spoke. It was just one black guy on the commercial for Pennzoil, and I was like, oh, make it over. And we haven't made it over anything. I was being facetious, but historically, NASCAR and things of that nature have not been. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the same diversity of like an NBA or
right.
And so when I saw that, I was like, that's different. I've never seen that. And so there are things that made me celebrate. That made me celebrate because I was like, hey, look, no, there's more opportunity in so many different areas. And so I'm really happy about the fact that it's Juneteenth. I'm happy that I'm here for Juneteenth. I'm happy that that these conversations are being had with all cultures.
Yes.
I'm not happy about what happened to the gentleman with the knee on the neck. I'm happy about the outpouring afterwards. I'm happy about the catalyst that it served as, for these conversations. For my neighbor who I don't really talk to about issues like this to reach out and say, hey, how can I help? Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Because now, like you said with Sherry, you're like, I didn't know that. You didn't see, there's no grid. And she's like, wait a minute. So now people are open to these conversations and they're not so afraid of being uncomfortable. I ramped right there. Go ahead, Z.
I have an 80-year-old woman that I walk with every Wednesday. And she's Caucasian, and she has been an activist, she and her partner, for years and years and years, civil rights. And so now she is in a neighborhood where I'm sure it's 95% white. But what she has done, she has a Black Lives Matter in her driveway that she drew with chalk. I was at her place today, so I wanted to go see it because I'm going to imitate it. And then she has a sheet that she has Black Lives Matter. She has allowed children to come, or anybody who wants to come and write on their driveway, just different messages. And so she's being able to be used, like you said, as a catalyst and to educate her community. She calls it Black Lives Plaza. So it's a meeting place. Yeah, very, very nice. So so when you were mentioning earlier uh, about I'm going to the next steps now, because this last couple of weeks I have just been so, I'm sure we all have, just terribly upset. And if I start talking about it now, I'll start crying right here on before billions of national TV. but but people have reached out, all colors, and mainly because I have a lot of white friends whom I love, reached out. Z, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? How can I help? What can So I've just kind of given them little assignments, and but people have to do this in their own way. We
Yes.
we cannot push, and that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons I think I've been very quote unquote successful is we have to meet everybody where they are.
Yes.
And if they're willing to move forward, hey, I'm there with you. If you're not willing to move forward, but you don't mess with me and mine, I'm there for you too.
Yes.
So that's where I am, the peacemaker.
That's good.
All right. How about you, Sherry, Stephen? Let's see. I asked about that. How do we? Everybody has an idea. This is America. I know we all have opinions. She said about her next steps. What are some next steps that you guys think would be helpful for everyone as we move forward?
Well, for me, I just think like educate. We need to educate ourselves on the history, and that speaks volumes there. I know me and Sherry have. There's a pastor that's affiliated with our church, and they put on peaceful protests, and so we've gone to those, or at least that one, and they've also had some prayer nights, individuals, up in specifically in regards to racism and unity and love and dispelling this lie. And I call it a lie. It goes all the way back to the garden. But I'm just saying and so we conquered that with love and with unity, and education, and so those are some things that we're trying to do right now. If family reaches out, and you're right, not everybody, even within our own families, even being Caucasian within our own families, sometimes there's perceptions and, like you say, systems and structures and things like that are have been established, and maybe nobody's ever like asked a question about those things, and so maybe they've never really had to like go think about it. And maybe that's a good thing, to go think about it and think, well, wait a minute, And then the other thing I was going to mention is, there's, when I say unity, there's, and I'm so grateful that we have our one of our pastors, the head pastor, senior pastor at our church is African American, and he's really been on preaching about unity and love, and so those are the kind of things that that are just really important, that just strengthen, because he says this. How did he say it, honey? That this spirit of racism's got to die. So
Spirit of racism, it's
yeah,
dying. It's doing it. Yeah.
So there you go.
It's gotta die.
One of the things that I love is now we're in a church where there is such support, and there is, there are those that are actively reaching out. Like, okay, I want to understand. I don't get it. You know what I mean? Or like, okay, Sherry, tell me about your experiences here in Washington State. Is it different than when you were in New Jersey? Is it different than when you were in Oklahoma? And to be able to tell our stories, like you said, Missy, you know, being able to have that voice, you know, and that has just been so precious in this time, because that's where the healing starts. That's where the healing is, you know, being able to listen and being able to share. And I just think that, you know, our next steps, I agree with my husband, education, helping people kind of see certain things that they had not seen before. I had a dear friend call me, and she goes, okay, so I'm here, you know, in this another state. Well, what can I do? And I'm like, well, I said, well, we're in election season. So go through every single candidate that is up for election. And, you know, whether it be judges or lawyers or, you know, AG, whoever, find out, like, how have they, you know, made their decisions? Like, we have to do the hard work. And a lot of people don't want to do that. But it is necessary for this to be the true move and change that we say, and not just a moment and a hashtag. And I so want it to be that movement. I want this new road to be dug well, to really have a good foundation, because I'm thinking not only about myself and my husband, I'm thinking about our children, my son, you know, my biological son, Jeremiah, you know, for his big sister to say, I have to look out for Jeremiah now. Now I understand, like, it does affect our family. I'm like, yeah, baby, it does, you know. And so it's just being able, you know, to see those light bulbs turn on, and to come with that, to meet that with compassion and grace. I've seen a lot of
and truth.
And truth, yes, because truth without the grace is like surgery without anesthesia. You can't do it.
It's traumatic. It's traumatic.
It just is.
Well said, Sherry.
You know, and for many of our friends and family, this is some serious surgery right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
You know, and we really have to be able to be willing, even though we've known this all our life, you know, but we have to be able to come, you know, with that grace and with that loving, and just being able to say, okay, I'm willing to walk. And here's a question: we want everybody to walk with us. Are we willing to walk with them as they are in this journey of learning? And I can say, I'm here, I'm a safe space, you know, I'm willing to walk with you. I want to walk with you, you know.
And you know what? Everybody, and this is the hard part. Okay, so everyone on this conversation right now, everyone, I can tell there is a spirit of reconciliation. Yeah. There's a heart of like peacemaking, reconciliation. Like everybody living, no, listen, you have a right, you have a voice, you have a place, you have a space. And you have the right for that space to be safe, whether it's your opinion, whatever, you know, like I can tell that on this panel right here, that we all carry that. And so I want to say too, like, that's not always the case. There are some who, like, we have known it all of our life. And there is an actual thought that says, and I'm not saying that thought is wrong. I understand the anger. I understand the hurt. I understand the frustration of year in and year out giving your best, and maybe things being the stool or the totem, whatever is being, not the totem, we need to kick those, but things are being kicked out from underneath you. And you're like, hey, look, I followed the rules. I did everything right. You know, I did everything you said, and I got here to the finish line, and now you add 4 more steps or 4 more bricks or 3 more layers, or you're like, well, you didn't do that. We changed it after you got through. And so I understand the frustration, the anger, the angst, the animosity. I understand all of that. I do. I get it. And so for a lot of those individuals, they're like, no, this is our moment. Why do we make it about you? You know, for those who are coming to ask. And so for those individuals, I don't want to put shame or anything on them. I do want to submit that anytime you make your bed in anger, like, that's where you'll sleep. You're laying with the very thing that you're hurt about. Or if you do, If you fight fire with fire, it's a pile of ashes. Like no one wins. Like I don't want you to follow a pattern that you despised in the beginning because now you're hurt. So now I'm gonna do it. Does that make sense? You guys understand what I'm saying? Like the bully keeps beating you up and you don't like that, but then you become the bully. Like these methods. And so I know sometimes people say, well, you got to do it sometimes, but I don't want anybody to be stuck there.
That's right.
Because that's the lesser victory. I'm not saying you may not. I mean, who knows? You know, peaceful protests didn't always work back in the day, but like right now, let's see what works. Let's see what works now. I don't think anybody should be passive. But I don't think you should just live so much in revenge, because revenge is going to eat up your harvest too. Your crop. It's going to eat up your soul. And so, as a person, as a female, whether it's sexism, racism, any ism that I encounter, I do my utmost to bring attention to that ism. And sometimes people they don't want to be around you. They're like, oh, you always, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, well,
I do.
Somebody got to always. And if you always feel like I always, then maybe you always, you know, maybe you always, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, so there's some, again, I rant, but I'm just saying, like, I'm glad that we're in this moment right now. A lot of people aren't. But I'm glad that we're in this moment. This is a transparent and true moment. Like, this is what's really popping off. This is the pus. You got to get the pus out. You know, let's stop ignoring and saying it's not any pus there. Just because it's a Band-Aid. Just because we got kids playing on the outside of the Band-Aid, no, it's pus under there. Let's get it. And so, go ahead.
And look at COVID-19, which is a blessing in disguise, in that we've all had to be sheltered in place. You know, we would have all these wonderful distractions, and we would not be so focused on what is happening now. But
that's true.
2020 is hindsight. 2020, when I mean, so much good stuff is happening.
That's good.
So much good stuff is happening. And from the medical to the political to the
government, 2020, you're gonna see it. This year you're gonna see it.
And that's one of the things that I want to do too. Is if we, I say this, y'all, if that person is reelected, if we allow that to happen this year, we deserve it. We deserve him.
Have mercy on us.
And not let it happen. That's all I got to say about that.
Okay.
So I have to do my part by helping with voter registration, by really pushing mail-in ballots, not going to the polls. And I used to go to the polls with my husband. And even now, I have the mail-in ballot, but I will take it to the poll. So just out of nostalgia. But and California is a big mail-in ballot state. And I really feel like we really need to push that for a whole lot of reasons.
How
about Washington?
Go ahead.
Are you all a mail-in ballot state?
We are.
Yes.
We are. That and that was new to me. I was used to going to the poll on the East Coast. I would walk into a thing that had a curtain, my own little section, and I did my stuff. And then when I got to Oklahoma, it was just like the tables with the dividers.
That's right.
And I'm like, what is this? I need a curtain. I don't want nobody to see my stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. See, that's what
So, and now, you know, so it's definitely been a change for me, for sure.
and I'm like you. I like to take my mail-in ballot down to the voter box.
And that's what we do.
It's not that I don't trust the mail. It's just I feel better by doing that.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe I don't trust it that much.
I recommend
I just want to make sure that I've taken it to the right spot so it counts.
Put it in there.
Yeah.
I just do it just because, to me, you know, it's American to go to mail it. You know, it's like, you know, they're even talking about closing one of the, well, you know how, I don't know about you all, but anyway, we're receiving this news that some of our the postal service is going to close. You know, the issues, the politics around that. So I've done a survey about a specific post office that's close to my house, and I just wrote in that, hey, that doesn't matter. I would just gather around all the ballots and take them down to the post office myself. But the other thing that
community.
someone mentioned, I just want to say this right quick. Someone mentioned the other day that when we do vote, that I'm not, maybe this is just California, I'm not sure, but you have to make sure that, you know, how you're either voting Democrat or you're voting Republican.
Mhm.
Well, now, on a video, this young lady was saying that the ballots will not have whether a candidate is a Republican or a Democrat. So you really have to know the names and, like you said, do the homework.
You have to do the work
For whom you are voting, because it's not going to be there. So there's a lot of little tricks, you know, to kind of fool us.
Can I just say this? You
Mhm.
do have to do the due diligence because the system is like an organism and it's going to fight for its own survival.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
You know, no system is going to fight to die.
No, that's right.
You know
That's
what I'm saying? Even
Very
from
good.
the jobs within that system, whether the system's right, wrong, or whatever, that system is a staple for some people.
That's
And
right.
so it's easy to say, well, they should have, who knows what's right, but we're all different. We all have different moral codes and different things like that. And so there's no guarantee a system is going to fight for its own survival. Like if something happens to my body's going to fight to live, you know?
Yeah.
The system is going to fight for its own survival. And so we do have to be willing to do the due diligence. And let me just say this, as I'm wrapping up, I want to thank you guys so much for being on today. I'm glad we did this conversation because this is just a real regular conversation. Listen, man, when I was younger, people would ask me a question, I'll be like, I don't know. And I may know. It's just easier to say I don't know because it's just a lazy thinker.
Yeah.
Listen, we can't afford to be lazy thinkers or lazy doers. We can't afford to be like, well, I was going to go do this, but it was raining. Or I didn't feel like some things you just got to push through. Let adversity to be your coach. So don't be a lazy thinker. Don't be a lazy researcher. You know, for me with voting, I have a niece. She researches everything. And I'll just be like, hey, what is this? What is this? What is this? But this past year, the past 4 years, actually, I've just been like, it's not fair for you to just only go with what she says. What if she's off? What if she's tired? What if she's busy? How come she can't come to you and ask, you know? And so just different questions like that really just made me like, you know, people like, oh, we better turn up to the polls on November 3rd or November this. And I every time I see it, I say it clearly. If you turn up to the polls November, if you just come to the polls November 3rd, hear my heart when I say this, you've missed the vote.
Yes.
Because that's the electoral college. And you can fuss about the popular vote should do this, but until the system changes, it doesn't matter. We're just fussing. We're just having conversation at the cookout. That's all. You know what I'm saying? We're just popping off at the pool party, but we're not actually affecting change. And so, as Sherry was saying, you have to vote. You have to vote for those county commissioners. You know, vote for who's the controller in your area. Who's bringing in the business? Who's bringing out the business? Who's voting on what's going on with the schools, where the bond dollars are going? Those are the things you have to know.
Ooh, that's where it is.
Those are the things that you have to vote on. If you want to see change, you can't just go vote once every 4 years. Dang, I know it hurt your feelings, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. You can't just go vote once every 4 years and then fuss for the next 3.5 because it didn't go the way you wanted. If we want to be effective in anything, let your money do what your mouth says. Okay, and educate. Be willing to listen to someone else. Maybe my opinion or your opinion is not the best opinion. Maybe it's just that an opinion. And so be willing to get other information. Be willing to educate. Be willing to be educated. And, you know, humble yourself. Every time you may not be right. And be willing. Just be willing to learn. That's what I'm gonna say right there. I'm gonna let that go. Y'all can y'all feel my passion? Is it jumping out over there? I'm like, go do it. Go do it. Also, we had a few comments and I missed some of them. Oh, vote for local initiative. Let me put these up here so you guys can see it before we go. That is true. Public education did do that. Public education did fail all Americans because it created arguments, you know?
Can y'all
Tulsa race.
I did not learn about the Tulsa race riot until I came to California.
I didn't
Sherry, did you?
I learned about the Tulsa race riot, or actually, I'm going to rephrase, excuse me, the massacre
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I did not learn about, I had not heard anything of it in any of my education growing up, none of my college years. And then it wasn't until 2000, I moved back to Tulsa in 2002. So it'd be 2003, the spring of 2003, when my pastor at the time, Bishop McIntosh, he began to teach on the race riots and go and take our church through that process.
Wow.
And
That's wonderful.
my God, I mean, like, my life has been changed. Didn't know anything about Black Wall Street. Didn't know anything about the, like, yeah.
Man, this is so good. I have to go. This is so good. I have to go. I have another show I have to do. Vote for the local initiatives. You must research for yourself.
Yes.
These patterns, if we look at the origins, listen, right now it's going to be TV, social media, everything is going to put the thing in front of you for you to make a judgment off of a pattern. Let the pattern cause you to research the origins so you can make an informed decision. The pattern is just that, the pattern. Don't get stuck on the pattern. Let the pattern point you to the origins. Why are we doing what we're doing? How did this come to be? And then look at the identifiers of the pattern so that we can do something different. You know, pattern is like fighting a root. It's like not fighting the root. It's like being like, I'm mad at an apple tree. So every year I just go pick up all the apples and be like, get out of here, apples. You got to go find the origin of that thing so you can chop down the tree. You know, and at this same time next year, we'll be picking up those same rotten apples again. So anyway, hey, I'm so glad that y'all joined me for this. Thank you so much for your time. Happy Juneteenth. If you're not familiar with Juneteenth, get familiar. And then right after Juneteenth, before you like, well, they, you know, blacks were freed and Juneteenth, slaves were freed on Juneteenth, and that's that. So before you get to that, after Juneteenth, look at what some of the systems put in place. Before you say, like, pull yourself up by your bootstrap or do this or do that, just look and listen and make an informed decision. There are some people who try to get over on systems, and that's of every creed and every color. But look at some of the things the systems do, because a system is never going to vote for its own demise. It's going to fight to stay alive. And we have to do our due diligence to be aware, to be informed, and to use our influence wisely. Y'all be safe. God bless. My name is Sharon Combs. This has been Knowledge and Nonsense with a special here with Z Lewis and Sherry and Stephen from up in Seattle, up in Washington State, the east side of the state, the mountains. Thank you guys so much. This has been a great conversation. I bless you. I bless you for just sharing your Friday evening with me. Hey, y'all have a good night, and we'll see you guys later.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.